and welcome to another episode of A Fresh Perspective with Jeff Charles, with your boy, your favorite conservatarian contrarian, Jeff Charles, where we prefer truth over narrative and principles over personalities. And you already know what I got for you. I got a fire conversation with you. That's all I've been bringing to you these days. I got another amazing interview, and this one's going to be a little bit different from what I normally do, but it's going to be exciting. I've been following this guy for a while. And he's amazing. He's incredible, especially, for those of you who like those little satire tweets that I do. I think you'll like this conversation. But before we get into everything, make sure that you like this video. Make sure that you share this video. And you got to subscribe. You got to do it. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I upload a new interview. Also, if you want to support my work, I've got all the apps in the show notes below, the CashApps, the Venmo apps, all of the apps, all the things. I appreciate any and all of it. Also, remember that LibertyNation.com is a proud sponsor of A Fresh Perspective. Check out LibertyNation.com for all of your conservatarian news, original articles, analysis, videos, podcasts, Liberty Nation Radio, and their signature TV program, The Conservative Five. All on LibertyNation.com, where truth is making a comeback. Now, I am very, very excited about this guest. Very excited. Can you tell I'm excited? I am very excited because I've been following him for a while, and I've heard him on different podcasts, and I've seen some of his work near and dear to my heart. I give you formerly of the Babylon Bee, but now with the Daily Wire as the head of kids content, Mr. Ethan Nicolle. How you doing, brother?
Hey.
You mind if I also, the creator of Axe Cop.
Yeah, well, the co-creator.
Co-creator, yes, right, that's right.
I say if I call myself the creator of Axe Cop, people go, "Wasn't that created by a 5-year-old?" Yeah, I was the older brother of the two.
Right.
If you know about it, I don't like to presume people know anything.
Axe Cop, it's brilliant, and I actually didn't even know about it until I heard you on Michael Malice's show a few years ago. And so I was like, I checked it. I was like, my son would really like this, and he did.
Yeah, that's a blast. Yeah, because 5 is like the sweet spot for boys because it was written by a 5-year-old boy. So
yeah, exactly.
That was a crazy time in my life.
I
created a comic with my 5-year-old brother, and it went viral. And suddenly, it was the last thing I made that I expected to be that would give me any kind of career.
Yeah, I mean, and then it ended up being a TV show too. I mean, it's incredible.
It was crazy. I mean, the amount of people that reached out to me, suddenly it was like, because I met you on Twitter. It's like suddenly all the accounts I followed as a fan suddenly noticed me and were talking to me. So weird. It's like watching TV and the guy on TV starts talking to you.
It really is. Yeah, it's weird how that works out. Okay, so before we get into the meat of everything, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, like how you got started and a little bit about your career?
Okay. Well, I was always trying to make it. I was mostly in comics. I grew up wanting to do animation, and then after I realized how much work that was, I decided comics instead. And I started making comics, and my first comic took me years, didn't work out. It's too much work, Everybody's first project is terrible. The second one I did, it got me an Eisner nomination, which is kind of like the Emmys or Grammys or Oscars of comics.
Oh, really?
For comedy. And so even though nobody read it, it got me a big award nomination, and that got Cartoon Network's interest. So they said, "Hey, pitch stuff to us." So I started pitching to them. And by that sounds like a quick and easy route. I was probably in my mid to late 20s by then, so it was a long journey.
Yeah.
So I'm leaving a lot out, but so I started pitching to Cartoon Network. I got my first show optioned by them, and that's what got me to move from Oregon, where I'm from, small town Oregon, Coos Bay, down to LA. Went down to LA, was trying to make it, pitched a show, nothing happened with it, or I got a show option, but it fizzled, which many option shows do. I got 2 more optioned, both fizzled. But in that interim, I made this comic called Axe Cop over Christmas break, kind of blowing off some steam, wanted to just goof off and have fun making comics again. And that thing went viral and changed my life pretty much. It was a wild experience. So got my first TV show through that. During that experience was when I met my wife, and I got invited by my buddy Doug Nicolle, who'd always been kind of a mentor and a good friend in comics, creator of Earthworm Jim.
Oh, really?
To write on Veggie Tales. So then I wrote on Veggie Tales for Netflix for 3 years. That was a whirlwind, crazy job. And then since then I've written. Then I started doing this for the Babylon Bee, and I was mostly doing stuff kind of behind the scenes for the Babylon Bee, writing articles, doing some Photoshops, and then kind of when the Bee got bought by Seth Dillon, they started actually kind of employing people, which they hadn't really done that before that. So I was the second employee ever of the Babylon Bee after Kyle Mann, who's editor-in-chief. Okay. So when I started out there, it was me and Kyle in his garage, and we kind of grew from there. And my main gig there, like at first I was doing a lot of writing, and then I was doing a lot of photoshopping, and then I created the podcast. So I kind of would create things and hand them off. So I created the podcast. So I created the books I've been doing, and then all the video content. So I brought in a lot of people, all the people that came in to do video and animation. Like, animation was my baby. I've always wanted to do animation, like I said. So we started doing it there. I had a blast doing that. So, and then somewhat recently, just a few months ago, I switched careers, and I'm now at the Daily Wire. And you heard them recently mention that they're doing kids content. It was me and my buddy Eric who left the Babylon Bee for now we're at this job, and we are making kids stuff for the Daily Wire. And we didn't get hired just to do kids stuff. We're doing any kind of scripted content. So that's one wild thing about this job. Usually it's like, here's your one project you're going to do. It's this one TV show. They're like, we need to make a bunch of TV shows. So start making stuff. It's a wild job. It's a wild frontier.
It sounds
it's exciting and somewhat overwhelming.
I bet. I mean, and you've had quite a wild ride. I wanted to ask, how did you go from doing comics to pitching TV shows? Like, how did that opportunity come about?
It's kind of a natural. Well, it depends. In comics, there's a few different kinds of. There's people that just are in it to draw. They're good artists. They draw Batman or something.
Right.
And then there's people that. And then there's all the different jobs. There's penciling. There's inking. There's all this stuff like that. Then there's writers. And then there's the creators, like, which is always what Doug Nicolle, like I said, is a big inspiration. I don't know if for anybody who knows his work, highly recommend it. Very family-friendly comics. Great for if you like reading with your kids. Big, bright, colorful images. He created Earthworm Jim. He's done a bunch of crowd-funded comics. All these graphic novels that are self-contained. He writes them and he draws them. And that was always kind of me. Like, I didn't want to just tell other people's stories. I wanted to tell my own stories. So that's been the weird thing, too. I always thought art would be my, I was always the best artist in town, wherever I lived, small towns, and so I thought that was how I was going to make it. But I've made way more money. I've made way more money writing than I have doing artwork. And comics lend themselves to that because there's a storytelling medium, and that's what a pitch is. And the comic is like a pitch; it's storyboards basically. So you're showing, that's why, especially there's a period. Kind of right before the age of like nothing but reboots. Right before that, I'm trying to think what period of time that was. Probably like the early 2000s. Graphic novels were getting bought up like crazy because they are. It's basically like a movie preview. You flip through it and you can just get a preview of the film right there. And so, while we tend to be very introverted and not good in a room, us artist writer type guys. Our work tends to speak for itself. It's good. I've never been good at pitching, I don't think, but I'm getting better. But that's one thing that helps. My buddy Eric Branson's great at pitching, so I partnered up with him.
Oh, that's good. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. So you started Axe Cop just as a way to blow off steam. First off, why don't you kind of explain what Axe Cop is for those who don't know?
Okay.
Because I'll fanboy out about it if I explain it.
So I've been working on my comic called Bearmageddon. I was like 30 pages in. I was burnt out. I had just spent a year in Hollywood trying to make something else happen. My first graphic novel I was working on when I was there, I gave up on it. I had just been not fired. I had been laid off I was working 2 jobs, basically 2 full-time jobs. One for Disney, low-end Disney drawing books, children's books. And then an educational company. We're animating math problems, which is as miserable as it sounds, but both well-paying jobs, which I'd finally gotten. I was not making much money when I was there. They laid me off in the same week.
Ooh.
So I was basically spending the last of my money to do a family trip for Christmas. And I was just burnt out. And so I didn't want to draw. I didn't want to do anything. I was just like, I'm going to just relax with my family. And then my little brother, who was 5 and I was 29, so it was a large age difference, the whole story there. He keeps saying he wants to play axe cop with me. And I guess he had been to a fire station gathering. The families get to the fire station and eat spaghetti and check out the fire trucks and blow the horn. And, and they get a little kit that has like a toy axe and a fireman hat and stuff. So he had this toy axe from the fireman station. In his mind, a fireman was just another kind of cop, but they were an axe cop because they carried an axe. So I think that's how he came to that, like his 5-year-old logic.
That makes sense.
In my mind, I immediately got this picture of Burt Reynolds as a cop holding an axe. So every time he talked about it, it became this thing I had to draw. So we played. I wrote down everything we said when we played, and I turned it into a comic that night. And I was laughing so hard at it. I was just my tears running down my face. So I showed my family the next day, and everybody's crying, laughing at it. And we all figure it's an inside joke. It's funny to us because it's Malachi, my little brother. But we're having so much fun. I think I made 3 or 4 of those while I was on that trip. When I came home, my buddy, who was working on my Bearmageddon comic, and we were going to launch it as a webcomic, I decided, let's launch X-Cop as a webcomic to test out. I'd never read webcomics. I wanted to try it as a platform, but I'd never done it. And I wanted to work out the kinks. So I'm like, let's do this little comic I do with my family that probably no one's going to read. And we'll just throw it up there and get feedback on how the site runs. And just basically it was like a beta test for my real comic. So we throw this site together, slap it together. It's a mess. We have this whole Flash interface that's all dated and bad. And nothing happens with it for like 2 days. We get comments from family members. And then suddenly, overnight, one night, it just explodes. It's Entertainment Weekly's website of the day the next day. And suddenly I'm getting I can't keep track of the emails coming in. There's talent agencies contacting me. Every publisher who's ignored every submission that I've sent them my whole life is reaching out to me to make a book based on one page of a comic I made. It's like, and not well drawn, like a sloppily drawn, one of my worst drawn pages ever, probably. So yeah, it was wild. So it escalated to, we did a multiple book deal with Dark Horse Comics. I spent full months with my brother writing full-on epic stories of Axe Cop. We did 6 volumes of comics, trade paperbacks, and then we also got a TV show that was on late night on Fox and did 2 seasons of that, and it was a blast. It was wild. So then that's Axe Cop, basically. You can look it up. I think you can get it on Amazon Prime. It was on Hulu. It might not be on Hulu anymore. I think Disney owns it now, and I don't think because it was through Fox. So
yeah, when I saw
probably involved.
Yeah, I thought I watched it on Hulu, but it could have been something.
It was on Hulu, but I think it's not on Hulu now, or it's gonna come off or something. I can't remember. I haven't checked.
Oh, okay.
But it might still be available if you want to pay per episode.
Gotcha. So, is Axe Cop ever going to come back, or?
I mean, it seems like everything comes back these days. So who knows?
Well, yeah, we are.
I never would have imagined it with the obscure stuff that's getting reboots. Like, you never know.
That's true. I wonder if it would be different now since your brother is older.
Yeah, my mindset with it always was like from the beginning. I kind of stopped myself and I was like, okay, this is a very specific period of Malachi's life. Like, and he's changing every day. People say, what happens when he's not a little kid anymore? Well, he's a different kid almost every day. I realized because of how constant my contact was with him at that time, and I wasn't a dad yet, how much he changed every day. They're learning new things, their ideas, their logic is constantly changing, which made it fun. I mean, Axe Cop went through all these interesting phases too. But so I really saw it as building a monument to childhood, to like that childhood innocence and just the fun of being creative. And it really helped me think in my rut that I was in creatively. You know, he had never read a book on screenwriting or story structure. but he was finding all these beats to stories. You know, I would question him, like if he left this beat out, I'd ask him like, well, you know, why did he do this, or what could have happened in his life that made him want to do this? And he'd come up with some funny thing, but like he would naturally come to a place where those, you know, stories are a real thing, and there's something that happens when you go on when you go off on a journey, you find it, and I think that just seeing how when he just dove in, and his whole point was because he loved it and he was having fun. It really helped me like try to remember like that's why I have to do what I do and not be trying. You know, you're gonna make, if you're a creative guy and you're making creative content, the amount of things that are actually going to sell in Hollywood are probably going to be like a tiny amount.
Right.
So at the end of your life, you want to look back and go like, I made the stuff that like I was excited to make, that I wanted to leave behind when I'm gone, that I want my kids to see. You know, I want people to remember me for. Whether or not it goes big, it's going to be found and remembered by somebody. So, so I don't know. It had a big effect on my creative process too.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, and you can. I mean, when I was reading it, I can tell. One thing you can tell that it came from the mind of a 5-year-old, but it was just so fun. Like it's just like I can tell that you guys had a lot of fun making this. Because like when I'm reading it, I'm like having a blast. I'm like, this is like the craziest thing ever, but I love it.
That was the fun thing about it too. Is I mean, it really was licensed to just go nuts. You know, there's no, you're not going to get weird story notes back. You know, like, so yeah, it was it. It was just fun, getting paid to have fun. There was one side of it that was interesting. I mean, to some extent, when you write your own stuff, then like, you're the writer. You get to, you know, when a 5-year-old's the writer, and it's your job as like this writer. He's really like, I explain this. He's kind of like when you're interviewing multiple people to describe what happened in a train wreck, and then you piece together this, and you write the novel about the train wreck. Like I'm the guy that writes the train wreck novel, and he's all the witnesses. So like he's explaining from all these different angles all this insane stuff, and then I have to make it into a narrative, you know, fill all the holes in. So I'm not making stuff up, but like I will like piece things together from. I have all these madman's notes written out from things he had told me, and then I'll go, you know, there's something missing here, but I'll take something he said way back here, and put it here to fit here, you know, that kind of thing. So it's like writing a ransom note or something with a magazine clippings. It's just a mess.
Yeah, really. Yeah. So okay, so then you went from there, and then so you were doing VeggieTales before Axe Cop or after Axe Cop?
Kind of in the middle. It was between season 1 and 2 of Axe Cop. There's a period of time where I was doing both at the same time. So yeah, it was wild. Around, I think season 2 of Axe Cop was just getting going when I started doing VeggieTales.
Gotcha. Yeah, VeggieTales is great. I mean, my kids, I don't know if they ever watched the one on Netflix. I think they watched it from before, but we had all like DVDs and all that stuff. It was great. But
yeah, we made the reboot that all the original fans despise.
Yeah, I thought I heard people complaining about it. I didn't. I don't remember if I actually watched it or not, but yeah, I think I do remember some people not being happy with it.
Yeah. It was an experience. I mean, I don't know. I'm pretty open about it now. It was weird working on a show that had so much baggage as a franchise. So there's so much politics involved and so much fear in messing it up that it almost made it worse. So it's just like there's a few people in that show that all basically had the same amount of power and had completely different visions for it. And so that kind of became this thing where we're working for these 3 people that all are telling us what to do, and none of them seem to agree on what they want. So it was bizarre that a show about, you know, a cucumber who believes in Jesus would be one of the most stressful jobs I've ever had in my life, but it was stressful.
Wow, yeah, I can't imagine that would have been easy. Yeah, well, and especially with something as legacy as VeggieTales. I mean, that's like sacred, especially to Christian parents. I mean, it's legendary. So,
yeah, it was wild.
The gravity of that situation. Yeah. So, how did you go from that to getting into the political space? Because that kind of jump doesn't seem as congruent, I guess.
Right. So it started off, when I saw the Babylon Bee pop up in my feed, I just loved them. It's like, oh man, this is my humor.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of that side of me that I kept hidden, because I work in Hollywood. And so I was always pretty paranoid about being too openly Christian, conservative, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So so it first became kind of side hobby. I pitched them. I think I reached out a couple times, and finally I found Kyle Mann, who happened to be a mutual fan of Axe Cop, and I was a fan of the Babylon Bee. So we started to DM on Twitter, and I pitched him like 30 headlines, and I think they ended up using like 10 of those, which I now know, having been through days and days of really receiving people sending me 30 headlines, 50 headlines, 20 headlines. Even having one useful one out of all those is like a jackpot. So now looking back and knowing like, okay, yeah, 10 out of 30 is pretty good. And even that, like that was from pent up years of, being excited to pitch.
Yeah.
But so it started with that. And then I said, hey, I can do Photoshop too. So, they pay a little bit of money for some Photoshops, and I do a Photoshop now and then. And then so it was a kind of a thing I was doing off to the side. And then once VeggieTales ended, it was basically a 3-year job. So once it came to an end, I was looking for work, and I was doing independent stuff. I did illustrations on Henry Winkler has a children's book series called Alien Superstar. I did illustrations for that. I do some comics for Wedgwood Group's company. I can't remember the name of that comic company I did with Billy Tucci. And I'm blanking out on that whole project. A zombie comic. I did a zombie comic. I did so a lot of little odd jobs, and that was kind of when Babylon Bee was kind of on my slate of odd jobs I was doing, and it just kept growing. And eventually, when they brought me on full time, it was still like we're a brand new company. You're our second employee, first just employee. Like Kyle's part owner, so like I was the first guy to get brought on as an employee.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so they just like pick a title. I was like, all right, creative director, I guess, because Kyle's editor in chief. I guess creative director's next on the list. I just looked at what the Onion had.
That's awesome.
But my goal for the Bee was always, I thought they could do so much more. That they could really be an authority just in comedy in general, kind of like National Lampoon was. They could go way bigger than just text.
Yeah, or Monty Python.
Yeah, go big. So I was always trying to push the boundaries of the Bee in medium. That's why I was bringing on animation, video sketches, and all those kinds of things like that. Just really trying to make that stuff happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, so have you always been like a political person? Like, have you always paid attention to politics, or is it just
I pay attention to it? It's kind of like the guys that I'm friends with. I'm not as much of a hardcore political guy. When you talk to me, the stuff I really care about is more in the world of, your faith, morality, values, meaning. So, I'm a huge G.K. Chesterton fan. That's one of the books. I put out a Chesterton book recently because when I was on the Babylon Bee podcast, I'd bring up Chesterton constantly. And I'd constantly get emails by people asking me, I've always wanted to read Chesterton, but I don't know where to start. And he is hard to get into. Like, most people think orthodoxy would be the best place to start. And it's a tough book to start with. And I learned through reading lots of Chesterton. Like, I started a Chesterton reading group, and it was just like I wanted to read it with people because he's hard to process. And I found it's great to process together. Like, we have a blast reading, which sounds weird. It's 100-year-old writing, but it's so discussable, and he's actually really funny. And so, and he talks about so many things. We have with Doug Tnaple and a bunch of my buddies, who most of us were closeted conservatives in the creative art field in Hollywood. Would get together every Sunday, read a Chesterton chapter, and discuss it, and that helped me discover that Chesterton is an essayist. The best way to get into him is to read his best essays first. That kind of sum up the way he thinks and a lot of big concepts. So I was going to make just a PDF to send to people whenever I got that email. And I was working on it. I was like, I can make this a book. So, it wouldn't be much more work. So
Yeah.
fully footnoted. I've always wanted some Chestertons fully footnoted because they never have that. They always lightly footnoted if you're lucky. The introductions. And it's kind of a casual Chesterton reader. So anyway, if anybody's interested in getting into Chesterton, the response to it's been way better than I could have imagined. It's been amazing. I get emails about it every day. It's called Chesterton's Gateway. It's my gateway drug to getting a full-on GKC addiction.
Good. Cool. So, so with the Babylon Bee in general, what is it about the Babylon Bee that you think has gotten it to where it is today? I mean, because I remember even a couple of years ago seeing it, I was like, this is pretty funny, because I used to like reading The Onion too. I've always enjoyed satire, and I would write satire here and there, but for me, it was the fact that, one, it makes fun of everybody, but it also makes fun of Christians, so it's not all just political. And like when I would read some of those Christian articles or about church, I'd be like, man, that is so true. That is so true.
Yeah.
So what is it? So what, I mean, was it the only right-leaning Christian satire side out there? Do you think that's why, or is there more to it?
I think the initial explosion, or the spark that caused the explosion for the Babylon Bee, definitely was in that genre of Christian insider jokes. If you know the culture, and I think the generation coming out of that culture and then looking back at kind of the silly culture of like the 90s and early 2000s Christianity, there was so much unspoken, so many jokes that hadn't been made yet because it's like we weren't old enough to like admit how funny it was. Mm-hmm. So I think it is, and they tapped into that thing. So there's all these there's this comedy gold mine, minefield, no, gold mine, I guess is a better, just waiting to be tapped, I think, and they tapped into it. But from the beginning, the Bee wanted to be political, and they wanted to make political jokes. And it has changed. Like I think the bulk of their audience at the beginning was the Christian culture, who loved the jokes about Christian culture, made in love by Christians about Christians. But also that they went, they'd make jokes that your typical Christian humor would not make. They wouldn't make jokes about Benny Hinn or these televangelist type guys. The Bee always took a pretty strong stance. Right. Or even like the jokes about Congress passing abortion bills and like all these political jokes. Like usually, it's always been like Christians just play nice, and be Ned Flanders. And so I think that was big. That was a big thing too. Yeah, that's the big advantage for the Babylon Bee has been no one else is doing it. No one else is doing it. It's I don't know why. That's always been. I do think that there's a weird thing there. I mean, that's a deep question. Why can't conservatives pull it off? Why can't we just? And I do think it comes down to it feels like on the left, people with money understand a little bit better, like why to invest in stuff that's not purely political propaganda or faith propaganda. Mm-hmm. They just get it. They seem to understand that like it's more effective to make great art. It's really hard. It's a harder sell with conservatives, especially if the ones that are investing, businessmen types. It's a tough marriage. I do feel like, and that's one thing exciting about being at Daily Wire. I think Jeremy Boring gets it more than anybody I've seen in this business.
I think he does too, but I think that just goes back to our reticence about getting involved in the culture. Right, we've always shied away from it. True. Yeah. There was never, and to me, like there was never a reason to shy away from it, but it's just something that happened, and you would even hear them say that the culture was important, but then when it's time, to actually do it, they didn't, or if they did, they did it in a way that was just awful. Like, I mean,
a bad imitation. Yeah, that's always been the game, right? Like, we don't want to imitate. We don't want to join in on culture, so they wait for culture to become irrelevant. And once it's like irrelevant and dated by like 10 years, then it's okay to imitate that. So it's always like Christian culture is always like 10 years dated. Their music is always like sounds 10 years older. It's like like Michael Malice always says, conservatism is progressivism going the speed limit, driving the speed limit. And it's kind of like that with Christian culture. It's just they're driving the speed limit, and just kind of going puttering behind culture.
It's funny because, it's not like the word says for us to do that, right? Like if you look at Paul and how he would approach different types of people, like if he was in Greece, he would approach sharing the gospel one way, and if he was somewhere else, he would do it another. And I think he even wrote, I am all things to all men. It doesn't mean he was being duplicitous. He wasn't being fake. He was just tailoring his approach, but he was very much involved in the culture. When I think it was Greece that he was, I can't remember if it was Greece or Corinth that he was at. And he was basically engaging in their philosophical lingo to be able to present his ideas and to present the gospel. And it's just interesting how the church, at least the modern church, has kind of just allowed itself to essentially become irrelevant. I actually did a couple articles on a survey that showed that church attendance has plummeted, and it's been going down since like 97 or 98, but it's even plunged more, especially because of COVID. And I think a lot of that is because, and this does translate into politics, especially with the conservative movement, because there's a lot of overlap there. Most conservatives are believing Christian, and we just don't get it. We don't get the importance of getting into the culture and changing it, not being changed by it. Right. And I can't figure out why that is.
Yeah. Got a million thoughts whirling around my head. I don't know where to land here.
It's a big topic.
Yeah. I know I talk about it a lot, but because I hate to sound all, because I know there's a lot of great people in church, and a lot of them just go work for Hollywood for Hollywood. Most of the real talented ones go work for the other guys, basically.
Yeah.
And part of it is that mentality too, like the us versus them. I think we have a tough time believing on our side that like truth, goodness, and beauty are things that God created. They're things that point back to Him. A secular film creator can make a movie that has truth, goodness, and beauty in it, and those can be powerful things. And we act like if it doesn't just have a Kirk Cameron gospel message really clear, flat out in your face, then it's not. Then it's too worldly, And I think that dichotomy has really served us badly. It's a shallow version, I think, of the truth. You think, I've said this a few times, but I love Kevin McCreary, who does Say Goodnight Kevin film reviews on YouTube. He's really great. I like watching. He reviews like every Christian movie that comes out, very honestly.
I'm gonna have to watch that.
He's funny. He's great. He does deep dives too. He's Say Goodnight Kevin. Check that out. So we were talking on I have a little podcast I do on my Patreon ever since Babylon B let me go, and we were talking about how the attitude of Christians about Satan he can seep through anything. He can seep through Harry Potter and Dungeons and Dragons, and it could be just one bad word in the movie, or it could be just the fact that there's no altar call in the movie, or whatever it is. Satan can come out through any movie and like make his way into the world and get his message out there. But so for some reason, Christ can't make his way through a movie unless it's like completely in your face. Like I said, Kirk Cameron, altar call, firefighter, or whatever. And it's just a silly double standard or weird contradiction of ideas that Christ can't make his way out through subtlety as well.
I think you touched on something, and I have some thoughts on that. I had something come up while you were saying that. Before I go into it, though, just want to remind everybody, don't forget to head on over to libertynation.com, a proud sponsor of A Fresh Perspective, where you're going to get all of the cutting-edge conservative news and analysis with none of the spin and all the nuance. You know what I always say. It's all about the nuance, and it's about going deeper. So you're not going to get all those, banal talking points that you're used to. You're going to get in-depth analysis on the issues of the day, and it's always going to make you think. So check out libertynation.com, where truth is making a comeback. So I wanted to bring this up, Ethan, because when you were talking about like the subtlety, the difference between subtlety and then pounding somebody over the head, you see a lot of people on the right get mad when, like, say Marvel or even in Star Wars, other pop culture, when there's a lot of wokeness in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I understand a lot of that, because the way I am, I actually don't mind a certain amount of wokeness if I'm watching, Falcon and Winter Soldier or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to be preached at. And there's a difference. Like, you can, I don't mind if they inject some of their ideas into it, as long as the story takes precedence over that. Like,
right.
I'm not going to sit down and watch you lecture me for an hour. If I want to lecture, I'll, bring it up on YouTube or whatever. But if you want to make a point, make a point. But the story comes first. I think that one of the biggest mistakes that the Christian industry has made when it comes to film and even in music and other areas is that they're beating you over the head with it. And I think that has a place, actually. I think some of those movies do have a place. But I hear Andrew Klavan has to talk about this a lot. You can write a Christian story and inject Christianity into it to where the audience may even get it without necessarily preaching, because they don't want to be preached at. I mean, you look at, even back in the day, Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, Lord of the Rings, lots of Christian themes in there. And even Andrew Klavan's audio drama that he did with Michael Knowles, Another Kingdom, you can see the Christian themes in there, but they're not beating you over the head with it. So do you think that might be one of the reasons why, it's not really working? Or
Yeah, there's this huge insecurity, that if you believe that your worldview is true, then you should believe that any true story you tell is going to bring that to people towards the truth, right? And we have this weird insecurity where we think we have to, like, slap this messaging over it to make it it's almost like you're doing it for to prove to your other buddies at church that you're earning your heaven points or whatever.
Right.
I just, it's, and then this is kind of jumping topics, but like you were saying earlier about not minding if someone else's worldview is injected into a movie, and I feel the most honored by an artist when they present their worldview in a film or a piece of art, and they do it with great art, even if I don't agree with them. Like, I always use the example of Get Out, such a great horror film.
Yeah.
And I probably don't agree with many of his politics, but it's a great movie. And like, it made me think about, side of things, because it's an invitation into his world, rather than, I think maybe that's it. A good story invites you into a world and wants you to go into it and think inside of it and put yourself in there and empathize and sympathize and be part of it. See from a different perspective. I think bad art doesn't invite you in. It's using the story to hit you over the head, tell you what to think. And that's probably, I never thought of it that way, but I think that's probably a good way of thinking about it, is are you being invited in, or are you being told what to think?
I think that's perfect.
We're guilty of that on many fronts, just trying to tell people what to think or to manipulate their emotions.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's and people can tell the difference. I mean, it applies to a lot of different things. Like, if you're having a conversation, I mean, if you're saying, "Oh, you're a moron if you don't agree with me," or or even let's go there, or "You're going to hell if you don't listen to me," that's off-putting. You're not gonna get anybody with that. But there's a difference between doing that and then inviting. That's what Jesus did when he was preaching. He would invite people, and they did it or they didn't.
And he used parable. He used story, and he didn't tell. People that say that you can't use violence or you can't use these things. It's like, Jesus told violent parables. He used stories to make points, and he wasn't. He was actually very rarely on the nose with them, if ever. I mean, they were always very, like, you didn't know for. He'd often tell them that people probably didn't really start to get for decades after or whatever, that's how he worked. It's weird that it's even a thing we have to debate, because it seems like not only are entire books of the Bible not hitting you over the head with like there's full books of the Bible that are just stories about things happening. There's Ecclesiastes, which is one of my favorites. in our culture, I don't know if that book ever would have made it in. It's so
That's
negative.
one of my favorites too, by the way.
Yeah.
Well, it's even when you bring that up, I'm thinking of the book of Esther, and Esther doesn't even mention God.
Yeah.
But you can see God in that story.
Right.
Yeah. So
we solved it.
Yeah, I mean, and so just to transition back to politics, I didn't expect to talk about religion, but that's okay. It all ties in.
I'm not sure what you usually talk about, so yeah, I'm fine with whatever you want to talk about.
It's actually funny. I've been talking about politics, but lately I've been going into different subjects, so it's okay. Like I've been talking about religion a little bit more and Christianity and all kinds of stuff.
Lately, it's weird because I when I was at the B, I was like having to be on top of the news constantly. I'm barely on it now because that's been weird. I'm at the Daily Wire now, but I hardly ever think about it because we're working on just kid stuff. We're just working on like entertainment.
Yeah,
it's been fun.
So when you were at the B and when you were doing the satire, like what process would you go through to create an article or to write an article? Like how did that, like, did you just like write a bunch of headlines and see what stuck, or in your mind, like if you're going to write a satirical article, how does your writing process go?
Well, the article's the easiest part. It's the headline. It's the big challenge.
Yeah.
And so when I first came on, we had a secret Facebook group that was invite only. And that was where we had, there's probably like 20 or 30 members of it, but active headline pitch people was generally maybe around a dozen, 8 to 12. And it was going on all day, your phone, every time you updated it. So it's just hundreds of headlines, I think every week we had somewhere around 300 to 800 headline ideas in that, that we'd all pitched. And then that was, I think at that time they were putting out 3 or 4 a day. And I think they're up to putting out 6 to 8 a day. I can't remember how many they're doing now. Mm-hmm. But eventually that group got a little bit over, we just needed to like tighten it up. So that group kept going, and then we created a kind of a smaller, tighter group on our Slack channel at work. And, with some of the actually hired on writers that were full time and stuff too. So that's always been it. It's just kind of like, it's basically like instant messaging with a bunch of writers all day long. The job never ends. It's happening at like 3 a.m. Someone like pops something on there. So, and then it's just Kyle is kind of the curator. He goes through and figures out what he wants to use and what he doesn't want to use.
So when you're thinking of headlines, are you like just like kind of skimming the news and seeing what's going on and then going from there to
watching the news, anything that's going on, and we're just pitching all kinds of stuff and all over the place. Sometimes that is nothing to the news. That was the challenge then, when I was there. It's like all those jokes about Christian culture from the last couple decades have kind of like been played out, and we're running out of them. And so I think that's when people really start to feel the shift. You get a lot of people complaining the Babylon Bee felt like it changed. And a lot of it is that it didn't technically, like the people behind the Bee have pretty much always been the same guys. Seth did buy it, but like Adam Ford's always been there. And Adam Ford's a very political guy, the guy that created the Babylon Bee.
Right.
And so I think the main thing that shifted is that those jokes kind of got played out. You can only do so many worship leader and skinny jeans jokes,
yeah.
And the news is always, and we became this thing that people went to for the day's jokes, for the day's news. So like that became there were times where we were the one who got the news story out. I'm trying to think of what, I think when Joe Biden said that he was going to pick a female vice president. I think that was my headline. He said, Joe Biden said, he hadn't announced who it was going to be yet. It was going to be in a day or two or something like that. So I think my headline was, Joe Biden says he's so close to picking female candidate he can smell her or something like that. Or something. Yeah. But like that one, because we got it out so fast, just the moment that we saw that someone had posted it, that was actually the top story in that, like if you looked at other, like we're above CNN and New York Times and stuff in the amount of people that had gotten that news from the Babylon Bee instead of from those sources.
Nice.
So there was a lot of, it became a game of like keeping up on the news and making the joke as fast as possible too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of what I do when I do my tweets too. I'm trying to do it as quickly as possible. But then it's like, if I do it too quick, I may miss out on actually thinking of a really good tweet that might go viral.
Yeah, you're making the obvious joke, which I think happens a lot. Or the joke everybody's thinking, which,
Yeah. Or in my case, a joke that people might kind of think is real.
Yeah.
Like the fruit basket thing. That was hilarious.
Yeah. Oh, I missed that.
Oh, okay. I'll tell you about it really quick. So remember during the Virginia gubernatorial campaign, how the Lincoln Project had those people pretend to be white supremacists?
Vaguely, yes.
Yeah.
I didn't follow very closely. Yeah, I heard about it.
Yeah. And they were trying to make him seem like they were white supremacists who liked Glenn Youngkin to smear him.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. So he wins, right? And so I put out a tweet. Whenever I put the word breaking in front of a tweet, it means that it's satirical, unless I say otherwise. Okay. So I put breaking, Glenn Youngkin campaign sends fruit basket to Lincoln Project to thank them for helping him win. And so I'm thinking, okay, that's probably going to get a lot of shares, but whatever. So it got shared by I think it got almost 10,000 retweets, a lot of blue check marks. A couple different publications picked it up as if it were a real story, and I'm like, that's bad journalism. You should have known better.
Very bad, yeah.
Then at night, somebody sends me a clip on Fox News. Guy Benson, one of my colleagues, is on Greg Gutfeld's show, and he says, I heard that Glenn Youngkin's campaign sent a fruit basket to the Lincoln Project. I was like, oh no, why? I didn't want it to go that far.
Yeah. Yeah, we had some of those for the Bee. Sure.
Yeah. So that's one of those ones that popped into my head really fast. And I was like, okay, this one's going to work. But then sometimes I'm just like, I don't know. So it's hard to gauge really what's going to catch on and what doesn't.
Yeah, that happened to us with, that was one of the funnest things we had happen was, it was after Ginsburg passed. We had the NBA team to show their support for Ginsburg wearing these lace doilies around their necks. Like her little lace doily thing she wears, and they did a really bad Photoshop of LeBron James wearing the lace doily with black.
I remember that,
and it went huge because a bunch of people on the left thought it was real. I'm so inspired by this. It's so beautiful what they're doing.
Oh no.
It was amazing. All these, it just went massive.
So let me ask you this then. I mean, because I wanted to talk to you about humor and using humor and all of that. I mean, what role do you think humor is playing in politics, or what role should it play?
For me, it's exposing absurdity and hypocrisy. But I think they're closely linked. But I think that's it, and it's showing that it's taking the gravity out of the room a little bit and showing the funny side. It's kind of knocking the monocle off the stuffy guy who's trying to act all serious. I think it's partly that, but it is exposing hypocrisy and just kind of showing if you say this, that sounds like this, or this looks like that, or just kind of holding a mirror up. Definitely plays that effect as well. So
yeah, I think so too. But it seems like there's something really powerful about it. Like there's something I've noticed is more powerful about me making a joke, but making a point while making a joke, and then just writing a straight article on it. And I know how often the left was attacking the Bee. Still is. I'm sure. Oh yeah, still is. I mean, Twitter's banned it. But even before that, I mean, you had fact checkers trying to fact check it because they were pretending like you were actually trying to deceive people or whatever. Why? First off, why do you think that they came so hard at the Babylon Bee? I mean, there's plenty of conservative sites out there, and they do fact check them. But with you guys, they came really hard. So why do you think that is?
I mean, I think that it's kind of like. It's like the the teacher in the lunchroom who comes after the kid who's getting the most laughs. And it's kind of like there's power in jokes. There's power in humor. Like Chesterton. I'll butcher this, but we always like to quote of the B. Humor gets in under the door while I can't remember the word he uses, like a logical argument is still fumbling at the lock or whatever. Like humor can slide right in there. It makes the point like that. It makes it fast, and also it's so disarming to first laugh and then see the truth that's being pointed out. I made the point made.
Yeah.
This happened with my daughter, who, initially was very woke.
Oh, really?
Teenager. She got on her first exposure to Instagram. She got on Instagram and just got sucked in.
Yeah.
And then she discovered, of all people, Brett Cooper, who's now at Daily Wire. She's female Ben Shapiro, they call her. She didn't know she was a conservative. She just started watching her videos, and she saw a couple of her funny videos first. And that opened her up to suddenly start watching her other videos. And she's not a full-on conservative now. We had this interesting conversation recently where she goes, I think I'm a lot more conservative than I thought I was. But she had just not been exposed to those ideas. And it was only because Brett did some funny videos. And those funny videos led her down that path to watch other stuff that she said. And because there's a thing about when you're making a joke and if someone makes you laugh, there's a generosity there that it's inviting. Like we were talking about that idea of being invited in. I think humor invites people in rather than it can be used as a cudgel. It can be used in a mean way too. But I think that's the other thing is I think the spirit of the Babylon Bee most of the time has been a jovial, fun, nudging with the elbow. Even if the joke seems a little mean, it's kind of like the uncle being kind of
Yeah.
Because even there's masculine humor is mean. It's like, man, you look like crap today. It's like the way guys joke with each other.
Yeah, it is.
And I think that's kind of a tradition of the Bee too. Is they keep their humor is in that vein. It's not the play nice, be gentle kind of humor. Humor is meant to be. Humor is meant to be because that's the other thing. Just comedy in general. And this is one of the rules of writing comedy is what gets a laugh is when you go into the naughty zone. You go into the area where things you're not supposed to talk about.
Yep.
And that's why free speech and humor are at odds, because humor goes in by design. You have to go into that and you have to find it, and you're finding it. So comedians really are tasked with finding that area, what can and cannot be said culturally. And that's kind of taking the temperature of the culture. And so for people who want to control language, there's nothing more dangerous than comedy. And that's one thing when I interviewed Elon Musk when I was at the Bee, that's when he said, when the cameras were off, he said, I think he said it since that he thinks that comedy is the most powerful tool against the woke mind virus. He likes to call it the woke mind virus.
I believe that.
And I think he's right, because nothing just holds a mirror up to its absurdity like a good joke.
Yeah, it's one thing to just say, "Hey, this is absurd." It's quite another to do it in a way that gives you that emotional reaction. Because when you're laughing, you're feeling an emotion, and it's not voluntary; it's involuntary.
Right. It's just kind of like when Will Smith laughed at that joke. He can act all he wants, like he was mad about it, but we saw the laugh.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. He probably still laughs at it when Jade is not looking. But I think that's why they come after comedians so hard. There's a reason why they come after Bill Burr, Dave Chappelle, or Joe Rogan. In Joe Rogan, he doesn't generally get in trouble for his comedy anymore, but still, he has a lot of comedians on his show. He's very much into comedy. So I think that's why they go after them so hard, because they know that people like Dave Chappelle, he's not just making jokes. That influences people, and they know it. And it's a very effective form of influence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, last question. I kind of wanted to ask. I want to know more about what you're doing at the Daily Wire with the kids programming. When is that rolling out, or what's your vision for it? Since you're the guy.
It's me and Eric, my buddy Eric Branscombe, who, that's funny. When I was at the Bee, I emailed Eric one day. I'm like, I really want to convince them to do animation and video. Like, can we just start making some? We just made it for free. Like, did some free animation for the Bee just to prove ourselves. And Seth was like, yeah, that's cool. Keep making that more, make more of that. So we started making it. And I don't think either of us thought it would, we hoped it would go somewhere, but it's wild where it went. I mean, it went to basically us getting this job at the Daily Wire.
Yeah.
And yeah, so he came with me when I went over to the Daily Wire. And so our job is pretty wide open. It's like our job is we're called scripted creators. So, I mean, the Daily Wire is ready to, because they've been making movies. You guys probably seen or heard of the few movies they put out. They got more on the horizon. They want to be making TV. They really want to make a platform with a lot of content. So, one of the big focuses is kids content, and me and Eric come out of kids stuff. Eric's written on all kinds of shows, a lot of the little kids shows you've seen, Octonauts, and he wrote on the new Animaniacs, and me and him wrote a bulk, probably 2/3 or more of the episodes of the VeggieTales series on Netflix, the 2 VeggieTales series that came out on Netflix, which is like, around 60 plus episodes each. So yeah, we both have a lot of children's experience. I think the exciting about it is, and I'm trying to think of like where the weird thing about this is there's like not much I can say, but I mean, Jeremy announced the 2 shows we're putting out for sure. So one of them, I'm going to be doing a drawing show where I'm hosting with a little psychotic puppet next to me. So it'll basically be like a very typical drawing show, but then the kind of the crazy puppet with me who never draws the thing right. So we're doing that one, and we're doing an animated show about a family of chinchillas, which I've always wanted to make a chinchilla cartoon. So
don't we all?
they've always been a favorite animal, and I'm always like, why don't they use chinchillas more? So we're doing that, and yeah, we've been working on that pretty hard, and we're building our team up right now too. So we're looking for talent too in this field, people that have worked for the Mouse or the Kid Fishing from the Moon or any of those companies, and see if they want to come work for us. So if you got anybody listening that works in those fields, tell them to reach out to me.
You heard it here, folks. Yeah. All right. Well, I really appreciate you joining me. I was very excited about this, and I'm really glad that you came on. I think we had a really good conversation. But before we head out, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you?
Well, if you just want to know more about me, I have my website, which I don't update as much as I should, but ethannicolle.com. Nicolle is Nicolle. If you want to follow me closer, so one thing that happened is I have a Patreon. I wasn't using it much, and then so the Babylon Bee, there was some drama. They let me go suddenly, very unexpectedly. There's a lot of behind the scenes there. And a huge amount of people who were very upset about that found my Patreon and just joined it. So I suddenly had this rise in hundreds of Patreon subscribers. And so I just started making content there again. And so I do podcasts, much like this, conversations just on there now. I may go back to public podcasting again soon, but because of Daily Wire, when I first got the job, I had like a 3-month period where I couldn't do public podcasts. We were trying to decide if I was going to do one there or not. So anyway, so there's a lot there. If you're interested in behind the scenes of what went on with me, I talk about. I didn't want to talk about it too much publicly, but a lot of people really wanted to know, so it's more there. But I talk to a lot of comedians, and our mutual friend Kira Davis has done a show with me on there.
Okay.
It's whoever I can get. Maybe we could talk on there sometime. So it's lighter. It's not straight up political, but it's a lot more about this kind of stuff, culture and faith. Comedy, and I just like life stories. I think people's stories from their lives are fascinating, and I like to try to dig them out of people if I can.
Sweet. Awesome. Well, check that out.
That's patreon.com/Ethan Nicolle.
Patreon.com/Ethan Nicolle. With 2 L's.
With 2 L's.
Right.
And then you can check my books out on Amazon. Chesterton's Gateway. I also have a book called Bears Want to Kill You. It's pretty popular. It's a handbook for surviving the bear apocalypse, which is about how you will not survive it. And And then my book, Brave Ollie Possum, which is my favorite thing I made. It's a children's novel, heavily illustrated, written by me. If you have kids and you like to read to them, it was designed to be read out loud to your kids. It's the perfect bedtime reader. You read, a chapter or two a night, and I've been very proud of that. So.
All right. Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining me, and we'll have to do it again soon sometime.
All right. Thanks for having me on.